A veteran journalist just exposed CBS News for something that should terrify every American. They were ordered to inject lies into their stories. This is the statement that CBS tried to silence.
About everybody needs to hear every word, so I'm just going to read every single word so that the audience hears it. It starts this way. There's never been anything in America like 60 Minutes. The Sunday tradition is the most successful program of any kind in history. For more than a decade, its innovative growth on every major online platform has extended its reach to countless millions around the world. This spring, at the end of our 58th season, 60 Minutes grew rapidly with an unheard of 9% jump in viewers on CBS. 60 has been the #1 program in America for decades because our beloved audience finds integrity, quality, and humanity in our stories. When stewardship of the program passed to my colleagues and me, our responsibility was to expand energetically into a new age of media technology while preserving the values our audience expects. Now, the new owner of our network is casting this legend aside, apparently to curry a moment of favor with the Trump administration. The waste is heartbreaking. Last month, 60 Minutes lost its DNA when our entire senior leadership and 2 of our best on-air correspondents were cruelly fired without cause. Good people were silenced because they stood up for our audience. They stood for fairness against the forces of political bias. They stood for professionalism against chaos. For my part, new management has instructed me to inject falsehoods and bias into a politically sensitive story.
Wow.
Oof. I've been told, these are just incredible words to hear from Scott Pelley.
One more time? Yeah, just read that
For my
again.
part, new management has instructed me to inject falsehoods and bias into a politically sensitive story. This is similar to what Cecilia Vega also had in her statement just last week. He goes on to say, I've been told to include assertions that are unverified.
Wow.
To date, in every case, I have managed to ignore these instructions or refuse them. Recently, politicians have been invited to choose correspondents for interviews on the broadcast. Giving politicians control over 60 Minutes interviews is not how this is done. Finally, incompetence and unprofessionalism in the new management have wreaked havoc. In a case involving one of my stories, the entire program came within 19 minutes of not getting on the air at all.
Wow.
This is 60 Minutes. I mean, 9 million people, I believe, were watching as of last.
And a financial powerhouse.
A financial powerhouse. At 60 Minutes, we have fought harder than anyone knows to save the program that became an American icon. We owed that to our millions of viewers. I am deeply moved by the thousands of wishes we have received to keep up the good fight. Most of the men and women of CBS News are still in that fight, but now the collapse of values at the top has become untenable. The leadership of 60 Minutes is no longer recognizable. The principles I hold dear are gone, and so I must leave as well. I depart after 37 years at CBS with one emotion, a heart brimming with gratitude for the men and women at CBS News who encouraged and enriched my work, very often at the risk of their own lives. I pray for a day when those people and their ideals are honored again, a day when sanity, competence, and courage return.
Wow.
How does the rest of CBS News come to work tomorrow?
How does the
it.
rest of 60 Minutes come to work? And how do the correspondents who are still there feel?
And how do the people who are doing this look themselves in the mirror?
Fine. Let me be clear.
They're good.
They're A-okay.
They're good.
We
They
talked
are
about this
good.
during the break. I would liken this. This is the equivalent.
They're good.
They're doging CBS, right? Elon Musk came into the government, not understanding how the government worked, and bulldozed it. Realized after mistakes, and just left a wasteland. Hated the government he was tearing apart, and there was no evidence that they wanted to rebuild it. That's what we're witnessing here.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also this question that you encounter time and time again in this era in a variety of contexts and institutions, which is when to stay and when to go. And what do you do with, like, if you work at the Department of Justice, right? And you're a civil servant who believes in upholding the law. How long can you hold on at the Department of Justice in the Trump administration? How long, what is the line? When's the moment when you get the thing from the boss that says, go do this thing that's over the line? And that set of ethical decisions that people had to make under these intense contexts of pressure get repeated over and over and over across the institutions that the current administration is trying to destroy.
Can I just make an argument, though? Whenever we look at those organizations and say, how could people stay? Why aren't they quitting? And we've said this about newspapers and television. these are people's jobs.
No, totally.
Right? These are their lives.
No, and I mean it. I'm not saying how could people. I'm saying I'm saying there are people right now watching this program who work in the Department of Justice who are like good people with great values who believe in justice. There are people who are watching this program right now who work in the FBI or in the intelligence, one of the 18 intelligence agencies that are apparently going to get helmed by Bill Pulte. I mean, across the board, there are folks that are embedded in institutions that are attempting to that sort of nefarious forces of corruption are trying to co-opt or destroy, and have to make evaluations about how they are going to.
I will say one piece of that is when you do decide you have to go. I don't envy anybody.
You got to do it that way.
You have to do it this way.
You got to do it that way.
You have to say why you went.
Yes.
And you have to say what you saw.
Yeah.
And whether you were pushed out or whether you left on your own terms, if it is time to go, I can tell you categorically, the patriotic thing to do is to tell what you know.
Here is the thing that I'm focusing on when I look at the CBS story. Scott Pelley is, as you described, just this figure in this time. But there's a new generation of journalists who are coming out of journalism schools and that are coming out of local broadcast and media situations looking to begin this trek. And what struck me in everything that Scott Pelley said was this: new management has instructed me to inject falsehoods and bias into a politically sensitive story. I've been told to include assertions that are unverified. If you are a 27-year-old newly minted journalist who's starting that track, this is what's so dangerous and corruptive and so poisonous about this administration and what they've been doing, is that they're not worried about the past and the things in the present. They want to transform, terraform the future. And in this space, in the media space, if I got a young kid and I'm telling him, no, you're going to put this in paragraph 27.
Okay, but here's what you're
What's
forgetting.
He gonna do?
Last Wednesday was the Emmys. And at the Emmys, and we saw 60 Minutes win multiple Emmys, a young man was given the Mike Wallace Award, right? He works, CBS gave him this award, and he got up there. He's not older than 25 years old, right? And he spoke out against this organization that is now being controlled by corporate interests and standing in the way of the truth. So I hear exactly what you're saying, but it also gives me such faith when you watch these extraordinary young people, right? That's exactly the point I'm getting to. How do they respond? And if he's the example of that response, then what you just said, Rachel, about that moment when you have to come to truth with yourself, they can write this letter. Yes.
Yeah.
They can write this letter.
Yeah. Jen.
I was just going to say, I want to call some preemptive BS on what we're going to hear from the right, which is that, anybody that's Scott Pelley, that Cecilia Vega are products of the left, that they are defending Democrats. And I'm just going to say, I worked for
CBS News veteran and longtime 60 Minutes correspondent Scott Pelley speaking out after he was fired over clashing with new management at the network. In a statement issued late last night, Pelley said 60 Minutes has, quote, lost its DNA when its entire senior leadership and several correspondents were recently outed. He also claimed CBS News new management instructed him to, quote, inject falsehoods and bias into a politically sensitive story, which, he says, he refused to do. Pelley was fired just a day after he accused the network's new leadership during a heated staff meeting of, quote, murdering 60 Minutes. CNN's chief media analyst, Brian Stelter, is joining us now this morning. I mean, this is almost like a clash of the titans here. He is well respected for his work, and he clearly shows no respect to those who are running 60 Minutes now. What did you learn?
And that's why this is really a crisis inside CBS News that's going to have ripple effects for quite a while. 60 Minutes usually takes a summer break, then it comes back in September. But right now, the show is missing most of its correspondents, either because they quit or they were fired. And now this network is going to be in rebuilding mode in a big way, having to figure out how to keep the program on the air. And that's going to fall to Nick Bilton, the new executive producer, who was appointed last week, creating a astonishment in the TV industry because of his lack of TV news experience. Bilton's a former tech reporter, a filmmaker. He was brought in by editor-in-chief Barry Weiss to shake up the show, and that's exactly what's happened. At a staff meeting on Monday that we talked about here yesterday, Pelley lit into Bilton, saying he was unqualified and saying Weiss is trying to kill 60 Minutes. Last night, Bilton sent Pelley a letter saying he was being dismissed. Here's part of the letter from Bilton. It says, "You hijacked my first meeting with staff to disparage me, my qualifications, and my intentions with remarkable incivility and contempt." Bilton said that CBS tried to broker a kind of peace deal yesterday, but that didn't work. Bilton going on saying to Pelley, quote, "You have no interest in contributing to the future success of the show or approaching my new tenure with a mind open to collaboration and progress." So Pelley terminated, and notably, the letter says he's been terminated with cause, which means his contract gets ripped up. This is probably going to cause a legal battle where Pelley might lawyer up and start to send legal threats to CBS. But overnight, Pelley did send me a statement, and he said that he stands by his comments about management. He believes management is incompetent and inexperienced. And then he said this about leaving CBS, quote, "I depart after 37 years of CBS with one emotion, a heart brimming with gratitude for the men and women who encouraged and enriched my work, very often at the risk of their own lives." He said, "I pray for a day when those people and their ideals are honored again, a day when sanity, competence, and courage return." So Pelley clearly not going quietly. He believes this is about more than him.
About how Scott Pelley's departure and doing so clearly, loudly, with conviction is also a big blow to Donald Trump. Of course, the blow is biggest and most obvious and most immediate to the management at CBS and 60 Minutes in particular. Like, obviously, that needs to be discussed, obviously, but don't forget that a lot of the changes being made at news networks are trying to curry favor with Donald Trump. Either Trump has directly asked for it or his cronies have asked for it. And in some cases, it's not even necessarily clear that there was a definitive ask. We demand you fire this journalist, and we demand that you don't cover this particular story and do cover that particular story. But these networks, knowing how Trump operates and knowing how he often backlashes quickly against any critical media, are sort of pre-censoring themselves in some cases, saying that, we don't even need to be told by Donald Trump. We're going to obey in advance and create a news network, a TV show, a media environment, a newspaper, whatever that is friendly to him, and we're going to do that. Or these right-wing figures in the media have always been looking for an excuse to shift hard right in their coverage and are saying, oh, well, we have to do it because Donald Trump is threatening us. So, we don't want to do it, but we have to. But the point is, when you see journalists like Scott P. speak up, it exposes the cowardice of dozens and dozens and dozens, hundreds of other people in mainstream U.S. media, whether on TV, in print, what have you, over the airwaves. It shows that a lot of them are cowards. And it also showcases like what's at stake here. This is being done for Trump. These shows are being ruined for Trump. Either Trump is directly asking for it, he's asking for it through intermediaries, or these people know who Trump is and they're doing it for him. But when journalists speak up, Trump loses.